The last time I was invited to a Rourke family event, I was asked to bring folding chairs and stay out of the pictures. That was 12 years ago. So when the cream-colored envelope arrived, thick as wedding cardstock and embossed with our family crest, I thought it was a mistake. I turned it over 3 times before opening it. The gold ink lettering read, "You are cordially invited to the annual Rourke Foundation Gala." My name was printed correctly, but there was no personal note. No hope you're well. Just the venue, time, dress code, and RSVP number. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, fingers brushing the edge of the envelope, half expecting it to vanish like a mirage. My mother hadn't spoken to me in years, not since I left law, school to care for Grandpa before he passed. "That's not a real reason to quit," she had said. "You gave up your seat for sentiment." No one else had bothered to come visit him in hospice, just me. I built my life after that. Quietly, steadily, a small nonprofit, a few grants, then more. I never told them how far it had come. I didn't need to, but apparently, they needed me now. Or maybe they just needed bodies to fill the room. Still, I said yes. I booked the flight. I bought the dress. I even called the number to confirm I'd be attending, under the name they'd forgotten how to pronounce. The morning of the gala, I received one text from my mother. "Just remember, this night isn't about you. Don't embarrass me." I stared at it for a moment. Then I tucked the phone into my purse and smiled to myself. She had no idea. The venue was a converted opera house in Charleston, all marble staircases and velvet ropes, the kind of place my mother used to say was too tasteful to be trendy. I arrived early, on purpose. I wanted to see it before the rest of them. Filtered in, all sparkle and noise. The woman at the entrance held out a tablet without looking up. Name? Eleanor Rourke. She tapped, frowned, then her expression changed. "Oh, you're that Eleanor." She stood a little straighter and unclipped the rope. A few heads turned when I walked in. Not many. Just enough to remind me I wasn't expected to show up, or at least not looking like I belonged. I didn't wear red. I didn't wear sequins. I wore a black satin dress with sleeves, and my grandfather's watch under the cuff. The foyer was grander than I remembered. Gilded light fixtures flickered like soft candlelight above a bar already humming with champagne flutes. On one of the projection screens near the ceiling, a slideshow played, glossy photos of past galas, awards, renovations, ribbon cuttings. My mother's face appeared more than once, smiling beside donors I recognized from old country club newsletters. Stood near the edge of the room watching, then came the voice I hadn't heard since before the silence. "Ellie?" It was my brother Carter. Same tailored smugness, same inherited jawline. He kissed the air beside my cheek, his cologne bitter and bright. "Wow, you look different." I let the smile barely reach my eyes. "So do you." "Thicker wallet?" He laughed, like I'd meant it as a compliment. "They didn't tell me you were coming." "Neither did they me," I said. "But here we are." And then behind him my mother appeared. She wore navy. Always navy. Classic, sharp. Her earrings were pearls I once saw her remove in the middle of a screaming match, because she said, "Even fury should be elegant." She looked at me like I was the stain she hoped wouldn't show under gala lights. "Eleanor," she said tightly. "You made it." I did. She glanced at my dress, then at the watch on my wrist. Her voice dropped. "Just, please, don't embarrass me tonight." I nodded slowly. I wouldn't dream of it. She didn't introduce me. Not to the donors. Not to the art trustees. Not even to the committee members who were passing out embossed programs and mouthing congratulations like it was a coronation. Instead, she placed one gloved hand gently on my back and steered me, not toward the inner circle near the champagne tower, but toward a side table near the projection screen, behind a floral arrangement, half shielded by a column. "I'll have Carter bring you something," she said. I didn't bother replying. I simply took my seat at the table she pretended not to look at again. The place card in front of me read, E. Rourke. Same font, same weight as the others, but mine was the only one with no title. No vice chair, no founder, no doctor, nothing to suggest I belonged. I folded the card in half. Across the room, I watched Carter laughing with donors, shaking hands with the museum director like they were old friends. He never once mentioned how the foundation he advised had nearly folded 2 years ago, or who kept it alive. One of the screens flickered again, this time with a drone shot of the museum's rooftop restoration. My name wasn't mentioned. There either. A waiter appeared at my table. Young, nervous. He leaned in slightly and whispered, "Ms. Rourke, are you the one from the Arts Initiative?" I looked up, startled. He nodded toward a group of teens across the gallery, high schoolers by the look of them. One girl in particular was staring at me with wide eyes. She held a sketchbook to her chest like it was armor. "I'm one of the interns you funded," the waiter said quietly. "I just wanted to say thank you." I blinked, not from shock, but from the sting of being seen finally without a spotlight. "Of course," I said. "You're why I'm here." As he walked away, I glanced at my mother, now mid-speech with a senator's wife. She hadn't seen any of it, but someone had, and that was enough, for now. They started the tribute reel just before dinner. The lights dimmed, voices hushed. My mother clinked her spoon against a wine glass and leaned in to whisper something to Carter, who nodded like he already knew his line. Then came the music. Sweeping piano, warm strings, and the first images flashed across the curved screen. Above the stage. Black and white photos from the museum's early days. Newspaper headlines about renovation grants, volunteer work, childhood programs, exhibits that revived a fading downtown. And then her face. Genevieve Rourke, seated beside a city councilman, then standing at a podium, then accepting an award she never mentioned at home. The narrator's voice floated overhead. Through the vision and tireless dedication of Genevieve Rourke, the museum's legacy was not only preserved, but elevated into a cultural beacon for generations to come. I sat very still. She wasn't the only one who had given, but she was the only one being remembered for it. The images rolled on, and I recognized them all. The gallery space I funded, the mentorship program I created, even the logo in the, corner of the internship slide, once my quiet signature, had been replaced with Rourke Family Endowment. They hadn't erased me. They had rewritten me into background. Someone gasped when my name appeared briefly in small print on a plaque behind a statue. It lasted half a second. Then the next image filled the screen. My mother, cutting a ribbon in heels. "She's incredible," someone behind me whispered. "A real patron of the arts." I didn't turn around. I just reached for my water and let the silence bloom in my chest, because now I understood. This wasn't just a gala. It was a performance, and they had cast me. In the wrong role, the quiet benefactor, faceless and forgotten, but that wouldn't be the ending, not this time. I stepped away during dessert. No one noticed. They were too busy toasting Genevieve with champagne and sugar-coated praise. The museum director had just announced a surprise encore video, a few words from our proudest donors, and I knew that whatever followed, it wouldn't include mine. The hallway outside the ballroom was cooler, dimly lit. The air smelled faintly of wax polish and lemon peel. I followed the curve of the staircase until I found the door marked "Staff Only," then waited. He arrived less than a minute later. David Tang, museum director, polite, underpaid, and painfully aware of who held the purse strings. He looked nervous. When he saw me, as if I might scold him for allowing my mother to bask in a spotlight I never asked for. "I was going to call," he said, voice low, "but your name wasn't listed on the public donor record and I requested anonymity." I reminded him. He nodded. "I know, and we honored that, but this felt wrong." I looked past him, down the hallway toward the ballroom doors. "She said she built all of this," I murmured. "That she revived the museum, funded the arts program, saved the internship. Initiative." He didn't argue. He didn't have to, because we both knew the truth. My foundation had covered the entire education wing. I wrote the checks that kept their doors open after the pandemic. I helped create a path for kids who looked at museums the way some people look at locked gates, not meant for them. "I'd like to say something," I told him quietly. He blinked. "Publicly?" "No names," I said. "But yes, publicly. He hesitated, but then nodded like he'd been waiting for permission to do the right thing all along. "There's a final segment tonight," he said. "A thank you message from the director. I can add a live note before it plays." I smiled, not out of victory, but because I could already hear the silence that would follow. "Just keep it simple," I said. "Tell the truth. Let it land where it lands." I returned to my table just as the lights dimmed again. People were still buzzing from the tribute reel, fawning over Genevieve, complimenting her decades of selfless service. My mother accepted every word like it was owed. She barely glanced in my direction. The museum director walked onto the small stage near the orchestra pit, microphone in hand. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and waited for the room to quiet. "I'd like to take one more moment to recognize a donor whose name you may not know, but whose impact is woven into every corner of this museum." The room shifted. Chairs creaked. Heads turned. My mother tilted her head slightly, lips parting, as if she were already preparing to stand. "This person," the director continued, "asked for nothing, no title, no photo, not even a line in the program. But because of their foundation, hundreds of students found their way to art. Because of their generosity, our doors stayed open during the hardest year in our institution's history." He paused. I didn't move. My mother slowly sat back in her chair. The screen above him lit up again, this time with images no one else had prepared. Community workshops, student art shows, classrooms full of kids holding sketchbooks and paintbrushes. There were no names, just images. And in the bottom corner of each slide, the original logo of my foundation. Unedited, undeniable. I heard someone murmur, "That's not the Rourke logo." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was clean. Real. The kind of silence that can only exist when a lie has been quietly removed. The director stepped back from the mic and let the room absorb it. I didn't speak. I didn't smile. I just sat there, under their eyes, and let the truth rise like mist around me. The applause came slowly, not because they weren't impressed, but because they didn't know where to direct it. There was no name, no face, no cue. Just the quiet unraveling of a story they'd assumed was hers. Genevieve didn't clap. She reached for her wine glass with a controlled hand and sipped like nothing had happened. But her eyes scanned the room. She was calculating, watching for who leaned toward me, who whispered, who suddenly looked uncertain. She turned to Carter and muttered something behind her smile. He glanced toward me once, then nodded, lips tight. Whatever plan they'd made, it was fraying. The director returned to his seat. The screen went dark. The house lights rose just enough for dinner to be served. But the energy had shifted. Conversations dropped in tone. Several people looked my way, not all curious. Some uncomfortable. That's the thing about truth when it arrives without drama. It doesn't need to shout to shake the room. A waiter placed a plate of salmon in front of me. I barely touched it. Across the table, a donor leaned in. "I had no idea your work went that far," she said softly. "We should talk sometime. I'm on the education board." I thanked her politely and turned back to my plate. It wasn't the right time for new allies. Not yet. That's when my mother stood. She raised her glass, tapping it twice. The sound echoed gently through the room, like a spoon on porcelain. Too soft to demand attention, but just sharp enough to interrupt. "I just want to say," she began, "how proud I am to see our family's legacy continue." She glanced at me without turning her head. "So many of you here tonight have helped shape this journey. And to those who've done so quietly, your work hasn't gone unnoticed." It was meant to sound gracious. But in her mouth, the word quietly landed like an accusation. A dismissal dressed in pearls. She didn't thank me. Not directly, not by name. She toasted the silence, hoping to trap me inside it. I didn't raise my glass. I didn't need to, because across the room, one of the student interns stood and clapped, just once, and it broke the room in half. After dinner, guests were invited to tour the newly renovated East Wing, the crown jewel of the museum's rebirth, according to the director. It was the final part of the evening. Genevieve had planned it that way, A slow walk past polished exhibit cases and restored oil paintings, all meant to culminate in a grand reveal, the Rourke family legacy wall. I already knew what they expected. A photo of her with a gold plaque beneath it, a framed donor letter, maybe a blown-up check if she really wanted flair. But when the crowd gathered in the atrium, hushed and curious, the space told a different story. There was no photo of her. No image of Carter handing over a donation. Instead, mounted above the central display case was a minimalist black and white portrait, a quiet image of a woman walking between rows of easels, her face turned away from the camera, her hand resting gently on the back of a child's chair, and beneath that photo, a single line etched into brushed metal. For those who gave without asking to be seen. Eleanor Rourke Foundation. The silence was immediate. Genevieve was near the front, just a few feet from the plaque. I saw the shift in her posture, a small, involuntary step back, not retreating, just adjusting to a reality she hadn't arranged. Carter opened his mouth like he might say something, but no sound followed. He looked up at the portrait, then down at the plaque, then over at me. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just let the stillness wrap around us like velvet. A woman beside me whispered, "Is that her?" Another voice answered, "Yes, that's Eleanor." No stage, no microphone, just the truth, sitting in steel and silence and space. My mother turned toward me then, slow and deliberate. Her eyes held something new, not apology, not regret, just recognition, the kind that arrives too late to be useful. I nodded once, not for her, for me. The days that followed were quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes after a celebration, when guests are still glowing from speeches and photographs. This was the other kind, the kind that settles over a person when the spotlight dims and no one reaches to turn it back on. No one posted about Genevieve's toast. No one tagged her in photos. Even the gala's official recap, published 2 costs. Days later on the museum's site, featured only one image from the East Wing. The plaque, lit softly from above, and the line beneath the photo. My name wasn't the headline, but it was the one people remembered. I didn't share the article. I didn't make calls. I didn't answer the handful of texts that trickled in from extended cousins, the ones who never quite knew how to place me at family events but were suddenly full of compliments. Genevieve didn't reach out either, and I knew that silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. She was waiting, calculating how to rewrite this version of events, one that didn't bend to her choreography. But this wasn't a story that could be pulled back. Not this time. A week after the gala, the museum announced a new annual grant under my foundation's name. The press release was simple, direct. It quoted the director, "Some contributions don't arrive with noise. They arrive with intent, and they stay." It made the local paper. Genevieve's name wasn't mentioned. Neither was Carter's. And, still, I didn't gloat. There was no need. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice. It was gravity. The slow, natural drop of false stories falling apart. What remained wasn't loud or vindictive. It was mine. It came in a plain envelope. No return address, no crest. Just my name, written in an elegant, unfamiliar hand. At first, I assumed it was another form letter. A thank you from the museum, or maybe a discreet follow-up from a board member who hadn't known where to place their admiration during the gala. But when I opened it, I recognized the name at the bottom before I even finished reading. Margot Langston, my mother's oldest friend. Her lunch partner, fundraiser co-chair, the woman who once whispered over a cheese platter that every family has a disappointment, some just hide them better. Her handwriting was delicate, practiced, but the words surprised me. Eleanor, I wasn't sure I should write this, but I watched what happened that night. I watched your mother try to steer the room, and I watched the room choose you instead. Not loudly, not cruelly, just honestly. You didn't take anything from her. You simply let the truth be seen. That takes more grace than most people can imagine. I hope someday she finds the words she should have given you. Until then, let me offer 3 I know she never said, but that you earned without question. Well done, Eleanor. I read the note twice, Not because I needed it, but because something in me had never expected it. Not from Margot. Not from anyone inside that circle. I folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer beside my grandfather's watch. The same drawer where I kept the first check I ever wrote under the foundation's name. The drawer of things that mattered but didn't need to be displayed. Recognition wasn't what I had come for, but it found me anyway, not through applause or legacy boards, but through one small sentence from someone who once looked through me and finally chose to see. Spring came early that year. By March, the cherry blossoms were already dusting the sidewalks outside the Charleston Conservatory, the site of Genevieve's next event. A charity luncheon for a cause I used to fund anonymously, back when they still called it niche. This time, I wasn't invited, not forgotten, just deliberately omitted. But I still heard about it. The photos made their way to the local paper, the way they always had. Genevieve in pastels, smiling beside a borrowed podium, her earrings too bright, her posture too sharp, but there was something missing. Carter wasn't in the pictures, neither were the Langstons, not a single trustee from the museum board appeared beside her. The article listed donors, but most were first-time attendees, newcomers, not loyalists. The captions tried to hold the illusion. An afternoon of grace and giving, they said. But the background told another story. Empty chairs, unclaimed, name tags, smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes. She stood there, same pose as always, like she was waiting for applause that didn't come. I didn't gloat. I didn't send flowers. I didn't ask anyone what had happened, because I didn't need to. Some silences carry more weight than a confrontation ever could. She had spent decades curating a room full of people who would echo her version of the truth. And now, for the first time, she was the only one left repeating it, not because I took anything from her, but because when the curtain finally fell, I didn't follow her off stage. I had already found my own light. I never went back to the museum, not out of bitterness, but because it didn't belong to me. Not really. It belonged to the students who filled its classrooms, to the parents who walked through its exhibits with their kids for the first time, to the ones who had never seen their names on a donor wall, but saw their children's artwork hanging in the atrium. That was enough. I kept my work quiet, just like before. The foundation grew, not louder, just broader. We opened 2 more programs, partnered with a local library to convert an old warehouse into a mobile studio. No ribbon cuttings, no press. I received 1 more letter that spring, not from my mother. That one never came. It was from the same intern who had clapped during the gala. Her name was Lila. She said she'd been accepted into an arts fellowship in New York. Said she wanted to thank me, not just for the opportunity, but for letting her see what power looked like when it didn't need to be announced. I kept that. Letter 2. Some stories don't end with a confrontation. They don't break open with screaming or slamming doors. Sometimes they just fade. Genevieve's voice stopped echoing in rooms that no longer bent to her. Her name wasn't removed, but it was no longer the one people paused at. And that, I think, was its own kind of ending. One night, I passed by the museum again. Just walking, no intention. The windows were lit, and I could see a class in session, a child pointing to a canvas, a teacher leaning in to listen. No one looked out. No one saw me standing there. And still, I smiled. They would never know the whole story. But I did, and that was enough. They built a stage without me. I rebuilt the room.